Hello everyone and welcome to that other special game that I've mentioned in the previous video from round 10 of this year's Tata Steel Masters. It is Alexander Donchenko versus Gukesh, and it's really a wild game. It's not even a game. This is an execution, what you will see here, and both of them are having an interesting event. But Gukesh is having a great event. He did get those two losses at Ding Liren and Anish Giri, but then he defeated 3 rounds in a row. He defeated Max Varmerdam, Anish Giri, not Anish Giri, Yanni Pomnishi and Jordan Pamforest, and Donchenko was struggling to get a single win in the tournament, but then in the previous round he defeated none other than Alireza Firuzja. So let's check out what happened here. It's a very nice game. Donchenko has the white pieces and he opens with d4. We have knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, and bishop to b4. So the Nimzo-Indian defense is on the board. e3 and now castles by Gukesh. We have bishop to d3, the so-called bishop attack against the Nimzo, and pawn to d5, just striking against the center. C captures, E captures, and pawn to a3. So very standard stuff here, much like you would see in any other Nimzo game. Bishop to d6 and queen to c2. We have pawn to c6, strengthening the center here, and you don't have to worry about this knight. You nicely cover the b5 and d5 squares. Knight g to e2, and now rook to e8. We have bishop to d2, and now knight b to d7. So again, all been played before, nothing new here. Pawn to f3, still waiting with castles, but you are hinting at a possible future e5, and now pawn to c5 until white decides what to do. You will strike against white center as the white king is still stuck on e1. So here, pawn to h4. You could also castle kingside here. You could also castle queenside here. But Alexander goes pawn to h4, and it's not a new move. It has been played before. Most notable game that I could find is the Wesley So versus Samuel Sevian. Wesley So played this last year. Or not last year, in 2022 in the US Championship against Samuel Sevian, but Wesley lost that game. Sevian replied with pawn to h5, but here we have knight to b6, and it is now as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. Okay, pawn to g4, Alexander continues marching forward, and knight to c4. You're probably expecting c captures on d4, or we often say it's principled when one side attacks on the king side. You have to strike in the center, especially if your opponent's king is on e1. But Gukesh, of course, knows that, and he's very strong, and he's allowed to break that rule. He plays knight to c4, and now bishop captures on c4. You have to do something. The e3 pawn is attacked twice, so bishop captures on c4, d captures on c4, and now again, not castles queenside or something, pawn to d5. Just keeping those pawns doubled, and now rook to b8, preparing to strike with pawn to b5, and again, one would expect pawn to a4, just stopping that, but no, we just have a continuation on the king side. Pawn to h5, we have pawn to b5, and here pawn to g5. So this is more of a bar fight than a chess game, as it seems, neither player is really reacting to what the other guy is doing. We have knight to d7, and now pawn to f4, just continuing the happy march on the king side. We have bishop to f8, will help out with the defense of the king side, and now pawn to h6. We have pawn to g6, and rook to d1. Just nicely aligning that rook with the black queen, and you could try some other moves. You could try castles here. Castles is even one of the top engine moves here. Even though your pawns are far advanced, they're still sort of defending you against black's forces. So castling kingside definitely makes sense. Castling queenside not so much. You run into b4 right away. But here rook to d1 was played, and now knight to b6 by Gukesh. We have king to f2, and now pawn to b4, striking on the queen side. Knight to e4, or you could capture once, but it doesn't really matter. Knight to e4, and now bishop to f5, pinning the knight here, and here knight 2 to g3, just defending the knight and preparing knight captures on f5. But the position is now completely winning for Gukesh, but you have to see at least 5 moves ahead to figure out why. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Gukesh while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on realizing that on knight f6 check, at some point you will sacrifice your queen temporarily. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook captures on e4. That's the move. And now, after knight captures on e4, queen to e7 is played, or getting ready to pick up the knight on e4. Knight to f6 check, and now queen captures on f6, played without much hesitation as the queen on c2 is hanging. And now there's a big problem here. If you play g captures on f6, then just bishop captures on c2, and you're just up to too much material. There's nothing for white to really do here. So here Donchenko throws in pawn to e4. Now what can Gukesh do here? Well, he plays queen to d4 with check, king to f3, and now look at this. Queen captures on d5. Absolutely beautiful. If you capture the queen, then bishop captures queen, and of course you cannot capture the bishop as the e-pawn is pinned by the queen. And if you capture the queen, then again you get this position where white is in a hopeless situation. Pawn to b3. Yeah, okay, you do have two rooks. You do have a rook for a bishop and knight, but it's completely unplayable. So instead, after queen captures on d5, Alexander figures out how to maybe play this. Bishop captures on b4 is played, opening up an attack towards the white queen. But now bishop captures on e4 with check, queen captures with check, king captures, and c captures on b4. We have a captures and bishop captures on b4, and we have this position where Gukesh has a bishop and knight for a rook, and he's also up a pawn. Now, is there any counterplay here for white? Well, if you can activate your rooks, yes, there certainly is, but if you can't, then no. Here, rook to d4 was played, and interestingly, Gukesh goes for a mini repetition here. Bishop to c5, rook back to d2, bishop to b4, rook to d4, bishop to c5, and now rook to d2. As Gukesh was down to some 13 minutes on the clock, Donchenko had, I believe, 23 minutes on the clock, and Gukesh wanted to reach time control as soon as possible. But of course, now he doesn't repeat. Now he plays pawn to f5 with check, frees up the f7 square for his king, and this is how he advances further in the game. G captures on f6, king to f7, now rook to a1, going after the a7 pawn, but just rook to b7. We have rook to d8, trying to go after maybe the h7 pawn, maybe the a8 pawn if the knight ever moves, but at least you have an active rook. King captures on f6, now comes rook to a6, pinning the knight here, so the knight for the moment cannot be moved. Rook to e7 with check, kicking the white king further back, king to f3, and now king back to f7. On pinning, we have rook to h8 going after the pawn, and king back to e6. We have rook to a8 now. Again, the knight cannot move, so the threat is rook captures pawn here, and Gukesh has to figure out how to play this. Now, the objectively best is king to d5, but this is does not look like a very human way to play. King d5, you're going to allow rook captures on a7. Now you're going to block with knight to d7, open up a discovery here, and after rook 8, rook to e3 with check, and this is how you progress further. King g4, bishop to d6, and so on. However, here after rook to a8, Gukesh played a more human move. Bishop to d4 just goes after the b2 pawn. Once you eliminate it, you just advance the c3 pawn to victory. So here, rook 8 captures on a7. We have rook captures, and now knight to c8, attacking the rook and offering the h7 pawn. While you could capture it, first rook to c7, just attacking the knight and the pawn on c4, knight to d6, now defending, and only now rook captures on h7. But it's not much better, as there is a win here for Gukesh. However, there is only one move that wins here for Gukesh, and it shows just how precise you have to be in an endgame, even if you have a bishop and a knight for a rook. Feel free to pause the video and show us your endgame skill, or rather endgame prowess, while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a true master of the endgame, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight to f7, the only move that wins for Gukesh, and I will show you why. Okay, you can play bishop captures on b2, you hope to advance the pawn. All of a sudden, rook to c7 comes, and now, okay, the pawn is defended, nothing to it, and even if you advance the pawn to c3, it will be defended by the bishop, but how to progress here? Let's say you go knight f7. Go after the pawn to h7. How do you stop h8 queen? Or rather, how do you progress here with black? The bishop for the moment covers the h8 square, but if you play pawn to c3, then just rook captures knight, and then you advance the pawn to a queen. So here, there's really no good way to continue. It would be a draw. That's why after rook captures on h7, knight to f7 is the only precise move that wins the game. We have rook to g7, again hoping to get some counterplay here, but I'm sure both of them know that it's over. Bishop captures, pawn captures, and now, like in the previous game, you cannot reach the pawn by the knight alone. You also have to use your opponent's king. So knight to h6, okay, you're guarding the queening square now, king to e4, and now king to d6. We have king to d4, now comes knight to f5 with check, and you've eliminated the pawn. King captures on c4, knight captures on g7, we have king to d4 and knight to f5 with check. King to e4, now comes king to e6, and of course white does have the passed b pawn, but there's not much you can do with it. Knight to e7, we have king to f3 and king to f5. Pawn to b5, now comes knight to d5, and here king to g3, and here Gukesh has to calculate, is it okay to capture the f4 pawn? He calculates precisely, he plays knight captures on f4, and he was in this position on move 57 that Alexander Donchenko resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So he did take down one candidate in the previous round, but it will not be two candidates today. And the reason you resign here is that, again, the knight will use a check to reach the pawn. For example, after knight captures on f4, what do you play? You play pawn to b6 here. You don't go after the pawn right away. If you go after the pawn right away, then the pawn marches forward and becomes a queen. But after b6, you just give one check, and now your knight is perfectly positioned. King f2, knight to d4, pawn to b7, and now knight to c6 guards the queening square, and that's all there is. Now you'll just start advancing your pawn and king, promote your g pawn, and win the game easily. So yeah, very nicely done by Gukesh, spotting that nasty tactic, or rather both of those nasty tactic. This one was very nice, but I also enjoyed the one in the end game. So if you found both of them, really big congratulations to you. So yeah, as I've shown in the previous video, maybe some of you haven't seen it. If you haven't, do check it out. It's a wonderful game, but these are the standings after 10 rounds have been played in the Tata, still 2024. So Nodirbek and Gukesh sharing first place with 6.5, 3 more rounds to go, so anything can happen. Anish Giri and Pragnananda on 6 points. On 5.5 points, we have 4 people: Virit Wei, Alireza Firuja, and Yani Pomnishi. With 4 points, Parham Maksulu, Juwenjun, Dingliren, and Max Varmerdam. And with 3.5 points, Alexander Donchenko and Jordan Van Forest. And here are the results of the other rounds, if you haven't seen them. So Juvenjun drew against Parham, Max lost to Nodirbek, Alireza drew against Anish, Virit drew against Pragnananda, Donchenko lost against Gukesh. This is the game that we've now shown. Jordan drew against Wei Yi, and Yani Pomnishi defeated Dingliren in that beautiful, beautiful game. Again, if you haven't seen it, do check it out. And yeah, I don't have it here, but I will tell you the next 3 opponents for our leaders. So in the final 3 games, Gukesh will face Firuzja, Pragnananda, and Maksulu. So not an easy pairing for Gukesh in the final 3 rounds. And for our good friend Nodirbek Abdusattorov, the last 3 rounds for him will be Juwenjun, Virit, and Alexander Donchenko. But okay, I mean, everyone is playing strong chess here. You have to be a strong player, but yeah, I would say that if I had to say who has the tougher pair up, I would say Gukesh has the tougher pairings going into the final 3 rounds. So we'll see what happens here. Nodirbek in excellent position to win the tournament, but Gukesh is a candidate, and he's here to prove it. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Christopher and Ruth Burkett, Ana Oliveira, Mehmet Sonmez, Usman Avdas Minas, and Juega Yedres Teresa for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.